let's start with the physical attributes. I'm giving you 100% to work with because there's only limited time, resources. Each martial art is so deep that you can spend your entire life trying to perfect it and not get there, right? So you have 100% to work with. How do you distribute that between, let's say, striking, Muay Thai, kickboxing, Taekwondo, Wing Chun maybe, wrestling, Sambo wrestling, Jiu-Jitsu? How do you split this percentage?
Okay, am I going to start with a brand new individual that has zero skills?
Zero skills.
Okay.
Blank slate.
If I'm going to start with an individual that has zero skills, I'm going to make it a requirement that he's in jiu-jitsu and wrestling.
That's it.
To start, yeah. Yeah, I'm not as interested in the stand-up as much. I'm interested more in the wrestling and jiu-jitsu. That's the biggest requisite I would require. Because he who can control where the fight goes, who is usually the victor. He who can control it. So let's just say this individual got to be a really good wrestler and good at jiu-jitsu, really good at jiu-jitsu, entered a bunch of jiu-jitsu competitions, submitted everybody, won the worlds, et cetera, and did the wrestling, maybe even got to a Division I wrestler or even got into the Olympics, you know, or maybe went in freestyle tournaments, maybe won a world title in wrestling. So obviously this guy's going to be able to take almost anybody down, okay? So if you have that ability first, that's first and foremost going to be your biggest weapon. Then you can teach them the stand-up. Then you can teach them the boxing, the Muay Thai, and let's say Sanda, let's say, you know, Kaji Kempo or Taekwondo. You can add other things to that. But for me, if I'm starting from scratch, then what I would call the most powerful piece, right?
The core, the pillar
core,
of it, yeah.
That would be your queen, right? So my queen would be my wrestling and jiu-jitsu. That would be my queen. And if I'm going to go after that, then I would use like boxing would be what would be right up there. So maybe that's my rook. And my knight would be like maybe Muay Thai, you know, something of that nature. It could be reversed too, but bottom line is my queen's going to be, if I'm having from scratch, my queen's going to be my wrestler.
Yeah, so interesting, right? Because I guess the original motivation for MMA was how do these different martial arts stand up against each other? And you're right, if you track the trend in the UFC, if you have someone with great jiu-jitsu or great wrestling, but average striking against someone with great striking and average wrestling or barely any takedown defense, most likely you're going to put your money on the person with better wrestling and better jiu-jitsu, right? So you're starting to see that trend already.
Yeah. Well, just look at the Nurmagomedov team, which is what I'm associated with. How many champions do we have? Who's got the kind of champions we have right now? Who has? No one's even close. And that's a team. They didn't come from this country, they didn't come from that country. They were born and bred by Khabib's father. And it was through wrestling and jiu-jitsu, sambo type combos. So the groundwork. That was their queen. And that's why they're so dominant. That's why they do so great, because they can deal with the ground. And of course, you know, they do everything now. They do the stand-up also, but that's their core, you know, and that's why they do so well, you know, and they have the majority of the champions. They had all the lightweight champions in the PFL. They had Gaji. They have Usman, who was the Bellator. And then they had Islam, who's the UFC. Now Islam went up to welterweight. And Movlid, who just won the PFL tournament. And then they had the one poor kid that got shot in Russia. They shot him. He was a tournament winner too. They had Ramazan, who's the welterweight. You know, he's the welterweight PFL champion. He's with Team Khabib. He's with us right now, training with us. And I mean, the list goes on and on. There's quite a few. Because why? And every one of these guys are what? They're great strikers? No, they're good strikers. I wouldn't call them great strikers. There might be a few that are, but the majority of them have what? Great ground game. They know how to control. They can control where you're going to go. Well, let me give you another example too of what I'm talking about. I'm gonna use a team that I thought was doing fantastic, the Fighting Nerds.
Yeah.
Okay, and all of a sudden, you know, they had a little mishap, and they're gonna have to regroup. And one of the biggest mishap was they were taken out of their element. You know, and you know, with the first one when they lost, when he got submitted by a guy from, was it France? I believe France. The lightweight. Julio was the fighting nerds. They just fought Saint
Saint-Denis.
Denis.
That's right.
Yeah. And it was taken down to the ground. He was exposed, et cetera, et cetera. So, what happens is you're on a roll, but once people figure you out, then they have an agenda where to get you, right? So if you have a strong ground game, it's a lot harder because if they got a better stand-up game, but your strong game is so good on the ground that you won't let it go stand up. You won't. So for me, you asked the question how I would build it. I would build the ground person because why? He could control where the fight goes. So we may find many people that we can't stand with, but how many people do we find that we can't go to the ground with? Not too many, because they're not focusing as much on that. Everybody looks pretty, like you said. They want not the boring fight, so they want the knockouts, knockouts, this and that. But hey, if you can be taken to the ground and you can't get up, whose fault's that? Look what Khamzat Chimaev and what happened there. How did they prepare for that fight? I heard the coach talking about they didn't respect Khamzat's stand-up. His stand-up is, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going, I was telling myself, is he doing that on purpose to get Khamzat to want to stand with him? Because that was what I would want to do. If my fighter couldn't deal with him on the ground, I'd be making interviews talking like that. So I'm thinking, maybe this guy's a genius and he's doing a good thing. Because he can't really believe that you know what I mean? He cannot believe that because he was talking like we can deal with him on the ground and that. And then I see the interview after the loss and he said, oh, well, we didn't prepare for the crucifix. That was the one thing we didn't prepare for. And I'm like, huh? The crucifix? I go, what about the chain wrestling that got you down? Did you prepare for that? Because the chain wrestling that Khamzat used was pretty incredible and it did their job, So bottom line is what I'm saying is he who controls where the fight goes usually dictates. And that was a perfect example. Khamzat, if he would have stood with DDP, what would have happened? Good chance he would have won, could have lost, who knows, right? But because he took it where he was most dominant, he did what? One-sided. Why? Because he could. So who are you going to blame? You're going to blame Khamzat, or are you going to blame DDP for not being able to stand or not properly preparing? Or maybe he just couldn't. Maybe he just could never get that good enough to deal with his ground. Who knows? I don't know. But I know that, I know what happened. And I know the mistake was he had to deal with his ground.